Good evening. Welcome to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show. My name is Leon Jones. Tonight, I'm going to talk about another topic during my Black History Month series. This time, I'm going to discuss to you what the reverse Underground Railroad is. Now, let me give you a hint. If you saw the movie 12 Years of Slavery, you're going to know what I'm talking about automatically, because the reverse Underground Railroad began at the Crenshaw House, which was formerly known as the Crenshaw Mansion. It's located in Hickory Hill in Gatlin, Illinois. Many people refer to it as the Old Slave House, and the National Park Service named the mansion in 2004 as the reverse Underground Railroad to acknowledge the owner, John Crenshaw's practice of kidnapping free blacks and selling them to the southern states so they can be slaves again. Now, the house was basically used as a pit stop to capture, escape, and free slaves before they were sold back to southern slave states. The third floor of the home had 12 rooms. Now, these rooms were believed to have had slaves chained in a jail, and this is where Crenshaw kept his slaves. Crenshaw was believed to be the mastermind of capturing these slaves because there was no way he could have not known these blacks were chained and housed on his property. Now, although he owned many acres of land, Crenshaw was well known and very wealthy during this time. Illinois was a free state and no one was allowed to have slaves. However, there was an exception to Crenshaw because of his business in salt. The law permitted the use of slaves at the salt works since the labor was so arduous that no free man could be found to do it. Crenshaw was indicted in 1820 while operating the slave jail, and again in 1842, but not all the information about his indictments are unknown. The case victims, Maria Adams and her 8 children, ended up as slaves in Texas. In 1828, Crenshaw took Frank Granger and 15 others downriver to Tipton Company, Tennessee, and sold them as slaves. Crenshaw also kidnapped Lucinda and her children in 1828, who were later ended up in Barron County, Kentucky. Now, letters identifying Crenshaw's role back both cases. Crenshaw also kidnapped Peter White and 3 others in the 1840s. They were sold into slavery in Arkansas, but later rescued. Now, stories of strange noises upstairs coming from victims date way back to 1851. Despite accounts that the rooms were slave quarters, Crenshaw family stories indicate a distinction between the plantation's household servants and field hands and the victims of Crenshaw's criminal activities. It was believed that the fates of the slaves and those who were forced into labor were sometimes deadly. The mansion was believed to be haunted by the spirits of those who suffered there. Now, going back about 150 years. Now, this is before Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. And we talk about Illinois. But I wanted to bring you this information because if you read anything about Black history, there's a lot of information that we don't know. I read this story over and over and over and over again. It was very appalling, but it was interesting. When we talk about railroad, we always talk about the Underground Railroad. And that was Cambridge, Maryland's own Harriet Tubman. But even with the Underground Railroad, she had help from whites. Because if she didn't, I don't believe slaves would have been able to escape. Remember, you had water, you had woods, and you had to know where to go. The Underground Railroad with Harriet Tubman was very well orchestrated. But I believe Mr. Crenshaw also had a orchestrated effort himself because he had his salt company. And see, in those days, labor was free. And in Illinois, since it was a free state, he had to find some way to harbor his salt business. That's why he utilized slaves. And he knew what he was doing. All the evidence points toward him. He was wealthy. A lot of these slave masters were wealthy. Now, in those days also, I can go back to tell you in Cambridge, Maryland, Salisbury, Maryland, with slavery, they also had breeding farms. And the slaves were blindfolded, even if they were family members. Their job was to breed so they could sell the children to keep them in slavery. This is how the white power structure maintained its edge in the economics, the politics, and the religious battles, because they made all the laws. But going back to the reverse railroad, this is the first time I actually ran into this story, and no public school had ever taught me this information. But I used the law of Newton to find out what was going on, and of course I saw 12 years of slavery. And going back to Newton's law, for every opposite, there's also an attraction. Or for a reaction, there's an action. But during this Black History Month, I plan to bring you the information that you can wet your whistle to, because for the most part, this isn't general news that I've researched. This was actually true. I went to the library to dig up this information. Also found it on my computer. But when we deal with our own black people, as tragic as it seems, slavery has also helped us build an identity. It made us stronger. And you know, today, again, and you're going to hear me repeat this over and over and over again, I just believe a number of us really don't understand what went on in the past with our African American people. We take everything for granted. And when you have individuals who escaped and or they were free, being captured in rooms, jailed, probably being beaten and raped against their will, to work for free down in the southern states. Now, I can tell you right now, I wouldn't want to go to jail now. But can you imagine what they had to do to survive? This is why the slaves always reverted to religion / faith and hymns. And some of the hymns that they sang were sad hymns. Why we today, as Black Americans, are able to get up and go to work. Once we get off work, we don't think about surviving. But those slaves in the reverse Underground Railroad, you put yourself in those slaves' places. Some of them didn't survive. Some of them did survive, and the ones that did survive had to go through pain and torture. Because it takes time to become free. You just remember these slaves, they didn't have the infrastructure that we have today. There were no cars. Everything was foot, horse and buggy, boat. They didn't have maps in their hands, and a lot of these slaves didn't read. So what did they have to rely on? Their own instincts. So if you saw 12 years of slavery, you're going to understand everything that I'm saying. Because I can tell you what, the more I do these black history stories, whether good or bad, I start to understand why black people are the way they are today. When we go back, I'm going to get off topic a little bit, talk about Black Wall Street. And I did say there will never be another Black Wall Street. Why? Because we're too divided. We'll never get together. In fact, some of us want to integrate to the Eurocentric way of conducting business because we believe that it is better than having our own identity. Although I wasn't born as slaves, I had to study to find out what my identity was. And sometimes you have to ask yourself, where did you get your last name? Some master gave my great-great-great-great-grandmother the last name of Jones. And since then, it's been Joneses on top of Joneses on top of Joneses. But I guarantee, it all orchestrated from the white master on a plantation. But when you have a gentleman by the name of Crenshaw, and you know I live in Portage, Indiana, and Illinois is the next state west of me. When they call it the land of Lincoln, I can understand why they call it the land of Lincoln. Because Lincoln was the one who supposedly freed the slaves. Did he really? He may have freed the term slavery, but slaves weren't free. They were under the delusion or illusion that they were free. Because then Jim Crow came after the slaves were freed. That lasted into the 1960s. In the 1970s in the southern states. But when you start looking at the history from all the events that I've brought up for 16 days in this month, what I'm trying to get you to see is that I'm building a community. Now, a community is built on the good and the bad, the men and the women. This is why when I do videos, you're going to hear me do male inventors, female inventors. You're going to see me do the reverse railroad and the underground railroad, because the events basically are synonymous of one another. They're to let you know that the events in black history really took place. They've been documented. And we can now take the time to learn about it. And that's what education is about. You have to remember, those slaves that were captured by Crenshaw didn't know how to read, didn't know how to write, basically didn't even understand the English language. But you talk about terror. Again, when you're free, and then you have to go back to oppression, that's something that most of us today would not be able to fathom. And this is why I say, when you do a crime, and you don't think about the consequences, that freedom that you have as a black person can be gone in a flash. Now, the escaped black people who were held captive in jail, chained up, didn't have a chance. They didn't know what was going to happen to them. But see, when I go into places today, such as Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, Newark, New Jersey, Reading, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Richmond, Virginia, and more. I know the same thing could happen even if you are an innocent bystander. And it can happen by our own people. And that's what's happening. In fact, the city of Chicago last year had 4,331 shootings, and many of them were black on black crime. That's a huge number. And those black people were shot by other black people. And as a black person, and any smart black person would fear for their lives going into some areas. And these are black people. And we talk about terrorism. We're terrorizing our own people. And we're not even thinking about it. You know, the other day, I saw a video. And it probably went viral. It's on Facebook. Where a pregnant woman, her boyfriend, who was a gang member, and a 2-year-old toddler were in the car. The pregnant woman, 20 years old, was singing some rap lyrics. All of a sudden, you heard shots ring out. Now, this was on Facebook Live in Chicago. And the end result, the 25-year-old boyfriend and the 2-year-old toddler were killed. She managed to escape pregnant with a bullet in her stomach. When asked to go to the hospital, she said she didn't want to go to jail. She had warrants out for arrest. Now, if you compare this to slavery, it's apples and oranges. But what makes the reverse Underground Railroad and the violence in the urban areas synonymous and the same is the terror that's involved, the perpetrators. But one of the big differences is the perpetrators in the city of Chicago and these other cities, they look just like me. And like you if you're African American. Now, I want everybody in the African American sector to take time and analyze history. Look what the individuals did for us who came before us. Because again, the millennials really don't believe that the older people did anything. In fact, they blame the older generations for what's happening. The older generations utilize what they had. Okay, they didn't have the technology that they do now. But one thing they did have is wisdom, and they should be respected. You look at this reverse Underground Railroad, and I call it the 12 years of slavery syndrome. We're innocent people who are free, taken by somebody who had an agenda. And this person, Mr. Crenshaw, was a wealthy man. Because he couldn't find anybody to labor his salt mine, he forced people to work for him for free. If that's not gut-wrenching, I can't tell you anything else. Because at the end of the day, when I give you the knowledge of these stories that I research, that should make you think about your life as black people, how we should value it. Because today, we don't value our own lives. We're killing each other over something senseless, stepping on somebody's foot, hollering at, we call it somebody's girl that we're not even married to, hollering over a guy that we're not married to. And the worst thing is, we're hating one another, jealous of one another. See, at least back in slave time, not that there wasn't any hate, but they had collaboration. And until we can get to that point to where we can disagree and collaborate as a people, nothing's ever going to change. We're always going to be divided. But one thing I can tell you, as an African American male, I can always appreciate what those African Americans in the past did for people like me. Because if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be able to speak my piece on a YouTube channel. And everybody else who's on YouTube, they'd be just as silent as me. So one thing you have to understand, it takes sacrifice to become free, even if you fail at it. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show for this evening, Thursday, February 16th, 2017. You can tune into the 401 Talk Zone radio show from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio. Guest call-in number is 215-383-5785. And if you like my videos, please share and subscribe to the 401 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube so I can continue to give you quality information for educational purposes from a professional and mature perspective. Now on this channel, I don't engage in emotional, debatable issues, social issues, unless I'm utilizing a social issue for educational purposes. Nor do I participate in drama or unnecessary bickering. What I do here on the 401 Talk Zone radio show is to give you education. So you can take the information that I present to you, you can utilize it in the real world, and it will help you expand your growth and knowledge of the real world. Because the real world is a very tough place to live. And if you think it isn't, think again. So I keep everything realistic, but positive, because knowledge is power. And if you have a business, a topic, or a YouTube channel that you would like for me to discuss on a 411 Talk Zone radio show, whether it be on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, please email me at lej6521@gmail.com. And if you have a comment, and I do like comments, leave your comment in the comment section under the video. But make sure that your comments are pithy. No bloviating, pettifogging, or filibustering if you wish to opine. Time for shout-outs. I'd like to send a shout-out to my fellow YouTubers. Conscious Effort. Rashawn DeLay out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Karen Kennedy. Sandy Pooh. Reg the Bad Guy. The Real Deal from Gary, Indiana. Brother Matt Coley. Tune to his channel if you want some trucking knowledge. It's called Big Body Trucking. Check out my boy Q Wilson if you want information on how Uber works. And last but not least, check out this nice young lady by the name of Felicia. She's got her channel called the Healing Palace. That's it for this video. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. Remember, please be gentle and respectful to each other and have a wonderful and blessed night. Good night.